All right, so we're recording this session here. Hope everyone's okay with that. We'll probably end latest 6:30 or so, and then later do about 4 MCQs in total, 2 writing, and then there are 2 of the reading portions present here. First things first, go ahead and just open this link real quick. It's a Google Drive with today's MCQs, so hopefully you can use this in the future, and also just use it for today, of course, to do the MCQs in order. Oh, Andy's reconnecting. Give me a sec. Let me get him in real quick. Wow, it's weird. It's weird to be back on Zoom again because it's been a hot minute since we've done this here. You do not need to chat during this entire process. I guess the most I ask of you is just to like maybe occasionally type if needed to answer questions or to ask questions or whatever. But otherwise, the only thing that you should be doing is to do the MCQs and just kind of like follow along as best as possible, right? So we'll go over answers and we'll just get an idea of like why certain things are the way they are and talk about some strategies you can do for the actual AP exams MCQ. Some forward first. I'm post it again for Andy. Just a forward for the MCQ portion of the AP exam. It is 45% of the entire thing, 45 questions as a whole, and there's 5 passages in total, right? The reading portion's usually about 10 to 11 questions each, and then the writing portion's actually way shorter. It's about 7-ish questions average, so kind of like work it out in that way. And it's going to be 2 reading first and then all the writing afterwards. So you can kind of shift your mindset halfway through. But in the beginning, it's like reading comprehension stuff and all that, right? So the first one we're going to look at is this one. Give me a second. We're going to be looking at reading number 1. So the very beginning of it says, when one undertakes to read any text. I hope we didn't do any of these, by the way. I'm kind of scared that we've done some of these beforehand, but if we did, just kind of wipe it out of memory if possible. We're just talking about strategy right now, necessarily like, getting the answers right per se. For this one, it's one of your reading portions, and I think this is from the more recent AP exam. So this one's kind of like more relevant and more embodying of what you're going to see here. So we're looking at 42 to 55 questions, right? We're looking at a pretty hefty amount of questions altogether, and the reading portion is going to be like that. More so the old ones, but the new ones are a little bit shorter. You're going to get a couple items in front of your face, right? You're going to get roughly a page worth of reading. You're going to get a little bit of an annotation here of what the text is. So this one says the following passage is excerpted from a recent book about the United States Declaration of Independence. So you got to think about now, what kind of text am I dealing with here? And that's actually going to help you how to approach it, because my approach to like a more antiquated reading and at the same time a certain different type of reading like an essay versus a narrative, whatever, is going to shift my mindset here, right? So I'm thinking about a book about the United States Declaration of Independence, not the actual Declaration of Independence, but a book of. So it's something that's going to be like an argument regarding it, a perspective regarding it here. All of these pieces are perspective. So we're just thinking about, okay, what does this author want me to believe? And what kind of perspective should we take on this here? If you're looking at about this length of a reading and about this many questions altogether, the usual rule of thumb is this: the reading should be about 2 to 3 minutes tops that you should be doing a quick little skim, a little bit of looking for keywords, and then you jump right into the questions there. You don't even need to read it beforehand. It's okay to just go into the questions and start there, but reading it beforehand gives you a little bit more of like, I guess, a confidence boost, a little bit of like a subject matter in mind there. So I do kind of recommend at least a little bit of time to just skim and scan it, but then you don't have to necessarily, right? What's more important for the MCQ portion is to think about what kind of questions you have. So you have it with you, but let's go ahead and just think about what kind of questions this one's asking altogether. Let me just put some windows away real quick. So you have these questions in front of you as well, and I'm just going to think about what type of questions, again, the AP exam is usually throwing at me. And I'll just read a few of these. Not going to go over all of them, but just kind of think about what kind of questions I had to get ready for, right? So on these MCQ questions, you're going to get 42. The examples inside the dashes in lines 1 through 2 serve to emphasize what, right? So they're going to ask kind of like writing, punctuation choice questions, a little bit of syntax questions there. So it'll test you a little bit of what you know about grammar and rhetorically what you can do with grammar. 43, in context, the sentence in lines 9 through 10 asking these art can best be understood as context questions. A lot of it is going to be context questions. They're going to ask you, okay, well, in this paragraph, in these sentences here, what is it basically saying? There's no trick questions on the MCQ. A lot of it is just like, what are you reading? And accurately, what are you pulling out from it, right? So I got to be sure to read carefully and accurately, especially in these lines presented here. 44, the author's primary purpose in the first paragraph, lines 1 through 10, is to paragraph overviews. Another big question, and you'll usually get paragraph overview questions in the first few of the questions altogether, right? The first few questions they ask in the MCQ portion are more of the big idea questions. Theme, sometimes tone, sometimes what's the big idea in paragraph 1, stuff like that. Just kind of like scale type questions here. All right, 45, let's do this one here. The questions in the first paragraph, lines 1 through 10, differ from those in the final paragraph, lines 54 to 62. I got a little juxtaposition here. Sometimes it's going to ask you about how one paragraph relates to the next one. So it's kind of like seeing the relationship between one paragraph to the next, one line to the next here, a little bit of just structural questions here. And so we're thinking about, again, how do I approach it and what I got to keep an eye out for? And that comes from those questions, right? 46, it says, which of the following best describes the relationship of the paragraph in lines 15 to 23, in fact, explaining it, to the paragraph in lines 24 to 36. So in this case, again, another paragraph relationship. Give me a percent here, another person in here, give me a sec. And for the person who just joined, let me just post one more time the items here. Paragraph relationships, have to read both sections, get the ideas for both, and then find best comparisons. So sometimes it's not even just looking at what one paragraph says versus the other, not one sentence, what it says and what the other one says here. It's also the relationship in terms of like what's going on, right? What are the rhetorical choices that are going on here? And then using those two different aspects and doing a little bit of compare contrasting and all that there. So the questions, super important. It's how you want to approach the MCQ for the AP exam. And so for each one of these, right, they're all chronological. They all go in order in line number. They go in order of paragraphs. Sometimes they'll do a little bit of jumping. I mentioned this before, but you don't have to feel like you're stressed constantly like going from one question to the next, looking at multiple paragraphs all together. It really is just, okay, let's go in order from one paragraph to the next, one line to the next here. So working that pace, right? I wouldn't skip around too much. I would actually work in that 1 through 10, 11, 12, whatever process there. So in this case, just consider those processes, right, of answering the questions. So for the first one, we're going to just do blind. We're going to see where you are right now for MCQs and talk a little bit more about strategies and so forth. The first strategy is really just a little bit of skimming, a little bit of scanning, and then later do the questions in that order there. So for the first one, you're just going to try it out real quick. You're going to try 44 to 55 on your own here. We'll time it, and then later we'll go over the answer shortly and see how accurate you were. And again, it's not like a big deal if you miss a bunch right now. It's really just kind of like muscle memory. MCQ is about muscle memory and what you can kind of retain essentially for this here. And if you have any questions about anything we talked about today, or if you have any questions about a question as to like, why is this right and why is this wrong, just let me know and we'll go over it real quick here. So I'll just post it one more time in case we are missing for anybody here. For this one here, 44-55, if you have any scratch paper, that's also really good too, just to have on the side to do these, you know what I mean? But you can just do it on a doc or something like that. It's absolutely fine too. So let me set some time real quick for us. And then for the first one, because we have, I believe it's 44 to 55, so that's like 12 questions there. 12 questions. The golden rule again is like 2 to 3 minutes reading here, right? So we'll do about 14 minutes on this one. And then later, if you have any extra time, go back and see if you are accurate. There's one thing that I usually do for MCQs is there are questions where I'm at least 75% like confident on, right? Those I'll never change. Those I'm like, okay, I can guarantee why I'm right for that. Let that stay. The ones that I'm like 50-50 on, those are the ones I'll go back and actually process. So what I usually do is I'll do a full scan of the entire MCQ first, and then later I'll mark the ones I'm like a little bit shaky on, the ones where I'm like, oh, this one kind of have a debate. And then later I'll go back and debate those. So those are the ones that you want to spend more time on. But the ones that you like, no, absolutely, I'll just do and go. For example, look at 48 real quick on the screen. 48 says, as used in line 34, spawn most nearly means these are the quick ones, right? These are the ones where, yeah, I can debate it later on, but these are the ones where I don't need to think about line numbers. I don't need to think about like too much in context here. I'll do this one and just move on and maybe go back to it if I really feel uncertain about it there. But these are kind of like definite terminology or certain diction choices here. So let's try this real quick. 14 minutes on the clock here. I'll mute myself so you have a little bit of time to work it through and do it on your own there. Again, about 2-3 minutes reading, then jump right into the MCQ. Questions before we get started for anybody? We'll do this about 3 more times in total too, so get ready for some MCQs here. We good? Going once or twice? Sold? All right. 14 minutes. I'll set the clock. Ready, set, and go. 14 minutes. I'll be myself for now. At this point, you have 7 minutes left. You have 7 minutes left for this MCQ. All right, folks, you're down to your last minute over here. I'll count down when we get to those last few seconds here, but one more minute so you can finish up those last questions. 30 seconds left. 20 seconds left. And last 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Folks, wherever you are, that is the first MCQ we got here. This is titled Informative. So I titled it Informative. It's not like directly informative like you would find it in like a textbook, whatever. It still has like an argument to it, but you have like a bunch of different MCQs there, but they kind of break down to two different categories. One is informative and one's more narrative. So on the one hand, they might have something that's informative in terms of offering you perspective, or they might have something that is, you know, an argument of how we should see the world. Maybe it's just like some documentation about science, whatever it might be. It's to inform, right? It's to kind of like show you some sort of content or knowledge or whatever. On the other hand, you get a narrative one that's about a person's story, a person's life, and what they use with that life to make an argument of, whether it's, I went through these troubles, don't do it yourself, whatever it might be. There you go. Let's look at answers real quick. So your answer sheet, whatever you got, let me just go and see how you did all together. And you don't need to tell your score, you know what I mean? You can if you like, but otherwise, here are the numbers along with the answers here. This number on the very right side here is the percent of people who got it right. So I think for some of the AP exams, they let us know the general like success rate people had. So the ones that are ranked higher are the ones that people did better on, and the ones ranked lower are the ones that people struggled on, right? So for example, if you look at number 50, it has 42%, 54 has 41%. That means that their total strategy questions were harder. That means the, what do you call it? Meaning questions were harder. So it's entirely up to how you saw it. We'll go over the answers in just a moment here, but otherwise, go and see how you did. Just real quick, 42 to 55, to take a minute or so just to mark the ones you got right and wrong. And later I'll go over the questions with you in just a moment here. So another minute, just to see. Okay, and I'll put these slides up in the folder as well. I'll put them later just so you don't have access to them as we're doing this process here, but then later you'll have the answers afterwards here to access and so forth. All right. Hopefully that's good for everybody. Let me know when you go back, but the answers will be on the next slide too. So we all good? Ready, steady, and go? All right, let's see how we do. Next slide here, we're looking at, once again, the answers, but now with a little bit of explanation, and I'll go over them just real quick here as to why it is the way it is here. So 42, it asked, again, this is the first one we looked at, right? I'm looking to the side here that I got two monitors, so I can look back and forth here. But 42, the examples inside the dashes in lines 1 through 2 serve to emphasize B, the broad applicability of the reading strategies that follow. So this piece was more about reading strategies, right? Not really about Declaration of Independence, but more so of like, how do you use a text and the different types of text that exist here. So 42B was looking more about like punctuation usage and rhetorically what was going on there. They were trying to include different types of text that, again, can be applied for the strategy altogether here. 43, it's looking at A here. In the context, or in context, the sentence in line 9 through 10 asking these, that art can best be understood as, again, we're looking at A here, a reason for adopting a particular way of studying the Declaration. So rather than just kind of like going through from top to bottom, this author is kind of like offering us a perspective, right? And you'll see a lot of questions. This piece has a lot of questions here, rhetorical questions as to how to approach a text in general. It's kind of like reader response, just kind of like a little bit of curiosity that goes into a text. And so in 43A, we're thinking about, why would you want to read it in a certain way? Well, here's why. In at least lines 9 through 10, right? And those lines were asking these questions about the Declaration will make us better readers of its democratic art. So it's all about asking questions main theme here. 44, the author's primary purpose in the first paragraph, we're looking at lines 1 through 10, is A, gives us an idea of how to read text here, and the answer was explain the value of an approach. So this whole first paragraph, we're just thinking about why is it good to ask questions and to read a declaration specifically in this way here, just kind of like change our mindset, right? Because again, they're persuading us. 45, you're looking at C. The questions in the first paragraph, lines 1 through 10, differ from those in the final paragraph in that, again, 45 is C, the former are meant to facilitate textual analysis and the latter are meant to facilitate political analysis. This is where it's a little bit more of a jump here. And again, it's usually chronological order, but not always entirely, right? In this one, you have to understand what kind of questions are being asked in the first paragraph versus the ones in the last one. So it says the former, facilitate textual analysis, to read a certain way, right? To analyze a certain way. Whereas in the last paragraph, it was to facilitate political analysis, right? How do you use these questions to think about your democracy and to think about then politics as a whole? So this one, it challenges you to think about, okay, content-wise, what was this one including? And another content-wise in the end, what was that one including there? 46, we're looking at E. Which of the following best describes the relationship of the paragraph in lines 15 to 23, and later to this paragraph here, 24 to 36, 46, E, we're looking at the first paragraph compares the declaration to a seemingly mundane type of document, and the second paragraph expands on the significance of the type of document. So they mentioned how it's like a memo, and at first you're like, memo, kind of boring, kind of like pointless, right? It's something that I think is just to take memo, to memorize something, or to like a little bit of a note. And they're like, no, that's not what it is. A memorandum is actually more than that. So in this case, the first one sets up our knowledge of a memo, and the second one lets us know a little bit more of what their definition of memo is, or what it intends to be, right? So again, we're looking at how they change our perspective, and this question was looking from one paragraph in relationships to another one. 48, you're looking at D. 47. The author presents a definition in lines 31 to 33, informal of action, primarily to 47C, widen a perspective. A lot of this piece is to widen our perspective and to, again, change and subvert our understanding of declaration, reading strategies, memos, right? So in this case, it's just changing our understanding of memo. So it really helps to understand what is happening from paragraph to paragraph and just an understanding of the whole piece as a, comprehensive whole. 48D, as used in line 34, spawned most nearly means generated. And this is like a context question. So we kind of like, if you have any doubts about this, you just plug each one and see which one fits the best here. So let's test this real quick, right? Generated. 34 says, give me a second here, let me scroll up real quick. In fact, its oldest usage, and it says spawn before, its oldest usage generated a formula. That makes sense, right? Generate means to create, it means to produce. So in that sort of like, synonym of replacement, that most makes sense there. The other options don't really make sense to me here. Reproduce means to like copy. There's not really a copy. It's not really like a, A to A type of thing here. Discovered, not really discovered either, because I'm not really like finding anything new necessarily. I'm just kind of like creating stuff that is based off of foundation. I'm not like reaching to the unknown and finding something, right? Corrupted doesn't make sense either. Imitated, again, we're not imitating anything. We're just trying to build and brainstorm essentially there. So we're looking for the best word in context. 48, we're looking at, 49. 49, we're looking at C here. In lines 37 to 39, the author prevents memos as D, trivial, 49C, routine yet relevant. So they're trying to show how in looking at memos and looking at these type of writings and looking at this way of analyzing, even though it seems like a basic skill, one has to do it. So they're, again, changing how we should see a particular skill and to act upon this sort of habit here. 50, we're looking at D. Which of the following best describes the effect of the author's rhetorical choices in lines 41 to 42? The brief declaration with which the sentence ends conveys a sense of conviction. This one's kind of a tone question, tone answer here. And most people got this one wrong because you can have to think about, again, rhetorical choices. So let's just read this line here, these lines 41 to 42, and just think about what is present in them. So 41 to 42, if you can just scroll up real quick to see it, the line says, because of their impact on our memories, writers rule. And I have a nice and simple line there. And the answer is brief declaration. Is it brief? Yes, it's literally one line, one super short line. It's a brief declaration of which the sentence ends conveys a sense of conviction. Conviction means like sureness or like a sort of commitment to. And so in this case, the rhetorical choice is a short but sweet statement that gets to the point here. The other ones, you have to kind of get, it's kind of like a plug and chug one where you think about like whether or not it fits the formula or what's going on there. The rhetorical ones, you're always thinking about rhetorically what is going on and if it fits the answer that I'm looking for here. So 50, we're looking at D. 51, we're looking at E for this one here. The main function of the sentence in lines 42 to 43, so falling shortly after, right, is to elaborate on the point made in the preceding sentence. So the previous one talks about how writers rule, and this next sentence that we're following up with explains what that means essentially here. So this is more of a structural question, just thinking about like, okay, well, I said this before, let me elaborate a little bit more on that there. 52. The shift to the past tense in the sentence, so we're looking at past tense, right? Thinking about this past tense choice in the sentence in lines 51 to 53 occurs because, again, D, the role of the declaration at the time of its writing. So this piece now thinks about the inception of the Declaration of Independence, kairos, right? Kairos, timing. We're thinking about a sense of time in the sentence here. So 52 to 53 says, but it also had the job of organizing a group to joint action, revolt from Britain. So I'm thinking about, okay, declaration is important because it created this job, or not, had this job of organizing a group, joint action, revolting, and all that there. So in this case, is to show what at that time this writing had a piece of and why we should kind of consider it in the context of that framework there. 3 more, 53. In the final paragraph, lines 54 to 62, the author suggests that readers should do which of the following. In 53b, use their own experience to understand the motives underlying declaration. So this one's kind of like a reflection question. It mentions our own lives and using it in modern perspective. So I'm taking a piece like the declaration, I'm asking questions, I'm trying to think about how this applies to my modern time here. The author is trying to have us use these questions to like, propel and make use of it in present time here. 54, in the context of the passage as a whole, the democratic art of the declaration mentioned in line 10 refers to the declaration ability to do all the following except, we got an except question here. So we're thinking about which one doesn't belong, right? Gotta be really careful with these because what you're doing is you're thinking about which one is true then and which one doesn't fit in the grand scheme of things. D, enforce a proposed change. Declaration can't really do that, right? And so the democratic art of the declaration isn't to enforce anything, it's really to kind of like use as a lens to evaluate and to reflect on and to ask questions with. So in this case, the document isn't necessarily like a rule, it's more of just kind of like a moral foundation, if anything here. And 55, based on the passage as a whole, it can be inferred that the author will most likely continue with a discussion that includes which of the following. This is a kind of speculative question. It's a question that you have to think about like, okay, well, based on everything I've read here, what might then follow or what have you there. So the pattern of these MCQ questions works like this. The first 3 or 4 questions, more or less, right, are going to be big idea questions. Questions about the first paragraph, questions about the whole thing. In the middle are your line questions. I'm looking line by line as to what they want to analyze. And the last 2 to 3 questions are, again, the big idea questions. This last paragraph, conclusion, what is the author intending, tone, whatever. So in this case, just thinking about this all together, right? So the question is 55A, an analysis of the declaration that addresses the questions about text introduced at the beginning of the passage. So in this case, these questions now are kind of like going to be put in play, I'm guessing. They ask a bunch of questions about declaration, about reading, about application, and now they're probably going to use these questions then to follow up on or to have us reflect on and what have you. So I got to think about very carefully each question, every answer, and everything has a right answer or the most right answer, but I'm going to have to like, challenge within these 5 answers here to back and forth there. So that's the first one we're looking at here. Any questions before we move to the next one by chance? When answering MCQ, do you think it's better to thoroughly read the passage first and answer faster, or to just skim it and look back and forth when answering? That's a really good question. There's no right or wrong answer to it, right? I think it's really just habit and also on your reading speed. So if your reading speed is a little bit better than expected, like you can actually read pretty fast, then yeah, go ahead and do a little bit of a deep dive and kind of go through it. I'm actually going to talk about reading strategy for the next one real quick here. But for a lot of people, they want to go for the questions first because the questions will let me also think about how to read. So I'm looking at this particular one and I'm looking for key things I might be noticing, right? So the questions are asking for particular lines. I'll keep a focus on that when I go back to it. They were asking for a word choice. I'll think about certain word choices, especially that one they're asking. Maybe they'll ask about tone sometimes, so I'm thinking about the overall tone here. Again, there's no right or wrong. It's really just habit in this case, but it's kind of like you gotta do a bunch of them and see which one works best for you, and also which one do you prefer more so. At least for me though, I do a little bit of a deep reading first, and I'll do it fast afterwards. So that's kind of my technique here. But some people will do questions first. Other questions before we move on? No, we're good. All right. So for this next one, we're going to do a little bit of interaction before we jump into it here. Go ahead and open the narrative one. It's 1 through 11. It's a little shorter than the previous one, both in the reading and also for the questions. So once you open this up, we're going to try a little strategy for this one, because this one is to kind of give you an idea of what to look for if you are reading the piece for the first time, right? So once you open it up, here's my first task. I want you to think about what you're noticing. Before we start doing the MCQ and all that, as you're going through this piece from top to bottom, right, I want you to just do a little bit of a note, a little bit of a checklist, right? You can do it on your paper, you can do it on your doc, you can do it on the actual reading itself, if you whatever you have access to. But all I want you to do is to note all the little details that kind of just stand out to you. For example, follow me on real quick on the first paragraph. So I think you can see my cursor. Hopefully you can, right? For the first paragraph, it says childish memory recreates one of those Trinidad afternoons of burning heat, glare, heat waves, making watery mirages on the asphalt. Some things I'm picking up already. It's about childhood memories. It's about Trinidad, a place. It's about burning heat. I get a little bit of setting here. So it seems to be narrative. And I'm proven by that by the passages from an essay published in the 1980s by a writer who was born in Trinidad, a former British colony. So I'm thinking, okay, mindset. This one's a narrative. It's about this person's life, probably, and they already gave me some details about what it is like in Trinidad. Other things I'm noticing, right? I look at here, look, and little quotations here. So I'm thinking like, okay, the writer uses some dialogue, some little writing choices that are more than just, your regular, here's facts right in front of you here. So there's going to be some rhetorical choices that I might want to keep my eyes out for. Exclamation marks, I see some M dashes again, right? So I'm noticing that the author is going to put a little bit of emphasis on certain parts. These are places I'm putting a little bit of mental note on. They mention their brother, presumably my brother, so it seems to be about maybe family or whatever. They mention the roar of engines, the aircraft climbing into a blank blue sky. So I got Trinidad, I got childhood, I got brother, I got some writing choices here, I got plane. These are all things I got to keep an eye out for when I'm reading. And if you have the luxury of it, when you're doing MCQ, I'm literally underlining this stuff. As I'm reading this here, I'm underlining all the choices that the author is making here, because I bet you at least half of the things I will mark down will be a question later on, or it will be a place where I'm going to put some focus on here. So here's my first challenge. Take about legit like a minute and a half, right? Not too long. I'm not asking for like a deep reading here. Legit, just like a minute and a half. And I'm just going to ask everybody, what are some things you're noticing from the piece here? Keywords, punctuation choices. Give me a line number. Give me something here. Minute and a half. Ready, set, and go. Just start marking. Just start looking around, browsing. You're at a store. You're just browsing. Even weird things that like stick out to you, like what is this term? What? Minute and a half. Another minute or so. Don't look too carefully. Just look for keywords. Look for some things that stand out to you. Another minute or so. few more seconds. And if you're still browsing, just go ahead and just skim a little bit more if you'd like to. But let me just open the floor real quick. I noticed some things in the first paragraph, but what else did anyone else kind of pick out from this one? And there's no wrong answers, just something that stood out to you. Any takers on this one here? Anyone want to throw a little gamble out here? Any findings? Any proper nouns, punctuations? Lots of dashes. So one person whispered me here, a lot of dashes. And even that first paragraph, I got some dashes. In the second paragraph, I got some dashes. And all throughout, I got some dashes here. So this author has a want of dashes. Maybe they'll ask me a question about a particular dash, right? Because what dashes offer are little commentaries throughout. So a dash is kind of like an extra add-on. It's an isolated comment there. And yeah, chances are some little commentary is going to be observed all throughout. Any others? Got a lot of dashes. What else? What else we kind of pick out from here? Italics. Yep. So one person mentioned italics here, especially towards like the middle part here. They mentioned like he had won an exhibition, would I? And I'm looking at that point there. I'm thinking like, okay, a lot of emphasis, right? Italics is a tone shift. And in this case, it's an emphasis that might sound kind of like, not snarky, but it does feel like this person's really trouble or focusing on something here. I got another one that says he was 5 years old at this time in line 12. Exactly. So now I have a little bit of persona. It's not the author being 12, right? Sorry, 5 years old. It's an author who's older now, reflecting on a time when they were younger. So they're going to have like an older person's perspective, reflecting on what kind of perspective they had back then. And that's a really important thing to think about because we're not looking for an exact POV. We're looking for someone thinking about like, man, when I was a kid, I was kind of dumb or whatever. You know what I mean? Any others? Let me get like one or two more. Anything else we noticed? Even like weird words that stuck out to you? Last ones? Going to school twice. Sold. No other challenges. All right, I'll point some more out that I saw at least here. Right, I saw this term here, willy nilly, and I'm like, what does that mean? Um, got to focus on words like that too, because now I got to think about in context. They're probably going to explain to me, or I'll figure out through context clues here. I saw the word Oxford, so I'm thinking like, whoa, big school. So there might be something about education as a topic here. I'm thinking about little quotations. I became sensitized. So not exactly sensitized as the definition directly goes. So maybe he's being a little sarcastic or whatever. All these little choices, I bet you in some way or form is going to come out. So when I'm reading MCQs, one of the big things I'm thinking about is what are some of the things that stand out? Because this is ultimately really rhetorical, right? This is a rhetorical analysis. And so all these choices are rhetorical choices the author is making here. And I want you to think about that as you are going through these questions. So we'll do this one really quick. We're going to do this one quick here. It's 1 through 11, and we're going to add 2 minutes to it so you have a little bit of reading time to go back and process here. So for this one, we'll do one more time. I bet you the things that you probably observed are going to be questions essentially here. So we're going to do one more 13 minutes on the clock here. We'll see how you do on this here. I'll give you a time check at roughly about 6 minutes. And then later, we'll see how you do for this one as well. So what did I say? 13 minutes? Yep. 13 minutes on the clock here. And I'll go over the answers with you as we did last time as well, real quick. And we'll go to writing right after this one here. All right, here we go. Ready, steady, and 13 minutes. Go. At this point, you have 6.5 minutes left, halfway, 6.5 left. And you're down to your last minute here for this MCQ. See if you can finish up those last few questions. And last time, same as like last time, we'll count down. "30 seconds left. 20 seconds left. You're looking at 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. That is time for you. Go ahead and finish up that last question you got, and we'll go over this just shortly. Give me a second here. Boom. All right, so this one, it was about some guy's reflection about his past and just like, childhood from the POV as an adult now, and just kind of like, having a little recollection of things all together. And let's look at the questions real quick, kind of consider the format of these questions here, whether or not that previous kind of approach was correct. So number 1 says the atmosphere conveyed by the first paragraph, lines 1 through 11, can best be described as. So in this case, I'm thinking like, oh yeah, it's a big idea question, right? It's one of the questions that asks for atmosphere and for the first paragraph. So far the theory is correct. The author uses the phrase, however abstract, however bloodless, in lines 16 to 17, primarily to emphasize, all right, we're getting really close now into the line questions here. So from this point on, I'm assuming most of the questions are going to be line questions. So if I look at the next few, line question, italics, line question. So you can kind of see how everything becomes like a line question at a certain point. And really only towards the end do we get kind of like sort of big idea questions, where it's like the primary function, the final question of the passage, something like that, right? Where it's more of like function or purpose or whatever, rather than looking at like particular lines and their kind of writing choices altogether here. So we'll go over the answers shortly. Here are the answers 1 through 11 for you. See how you did on this one. C, C, B, D, E, C, A, E, C, A, B. So those are the answers for you. Let me check real quick if the next one has answers too. Yeah. Just like an overview page first, just to kind of see what you got all together. So the rule of thumb is this: you want at least half of the MCQ. So for this one, I mean, obviously a little bit better than half is kind of nice. If you get at least 6 here, you're kind of on a good promise of the AP exam here. To score a 3, you need at least, what was it, 25 out of 45? So just slightly over half. If you can score that, then you're on a good track for at least a 3. And then your essays can just be like 3, 3, 4, or something like that. So you don't even have to do like profoundly good essays. You just need something that's like, my favorite word, workable. It's something that sufficiently answers most of the criteria, right, to some degree here. So pretty good shot if you have at least half. The MCQ is just kind of like the nice push towards the 3 here. So let's go over the answers just real quick here. This one I'll just go over faster than the previous one. Let me open up the MCQ real quick. And the little explanations are here as well. So in the first question, the atmosphere conveyed by the first paragraph, lines 1 through 11, can best be described as, I'm looking at C, ephemeral yet intense. So in this case, ephemeral means short, right? It's something that like short-lived. It's almost like a flash in front of your face. And it's kind of true that everything is kind of like these short little snippets, little examples there, and it's intense. It's something that's vivid and real. He talks about like the water mirages, the burning heat. So it's a very strong flash of memory. 2, C, the author uses the phrase, however abstract, however bloodless, in lines 16 to 17, primarily to emphasize that C, his brother's departure seemed innocuous. Innocuous means harmless. Seemingly harmless, but had serious ramifications, meaning at first it felt like his brother leaving was kind of harmless, but then it's like, it's impactful, right? This guy actually goes through some stuff because his brother is leaving here. 3, the repeated use of the term willy-nilly. I knew it. I knew willy-nilly was going to come up somewhere. So again, looking at certain phrases and keywords does pay off. So in this case, the repeated use of the term willy-nilly, B, conveys the author's sense of haphazard unfairness. And so he kind of shows how everything is, again, willy-nilly. Everything was kind of like whatever to just, he's not like saying whatever literally. He's kind of like having this attitude of whatever to everything, right? Like it's all kind of willy-nilly in his childhood here. 4D, the expectations in line 23 are primarily characterized as daunting because the standards they imply seem impossible to meet. And remember, he has like a brother, I think, who went to like Oxford, and he has like all these expectations now set on him. So in this case, he kind of feels the same here. The word expectations is to make us feel as well that he's going through this sort of like midlife crisis at 5 years old because he has to like live up to all this here. 5 is E, the use of italics. Oh, someone said italics earlier. So in this case, we're looking again at the writing choices. The use of italics in lines 24 to 28, primarily, E, dramatizes the comparisons between the brothers. So it's like the difference between he and I, right? It shows on one hand what he did, and then what he has to do now. The two different pronouns in the focuses there. We're looking at 6, which best describes the function of the statement. It was the courtesy, lines 40 to 42. 6, we're looking at C here, explains the statement in the previous sentence. So in this case, we're looking at the function of a sentence or a certain series of sentences in relations to previous things, right? So let's look at what that sentence is. 40 to 42. In 40 to 42, it says, it was a form of self-protection against the tyrannies that sought to imprison me, that offered me neither compassion nor courtesy. So it's to explain why he was a moody and enigmatic child, right? He's trying to do it for the sake of like self-protection, kind of like self-preservation, right? So it's providing context as to why he was so moody. So we're looking at why this sentence exists in relation to the previous one altogether. 7, in context, the use of the word tyrannies conveys the author's a sense of being dominated by others. And in this case, he's being dominated by his brother and his standards. This one's more like, again, context, right? So the word tyrannies doesn't mean like a tyrant, a king. It kind of does, right? Just the implications of one, but more so just the domination, right? The sort of power struggle that he sees. 8E, in the context of the passage, lines 40, 30, 46, serve primarily to extend the implications of past events into the present. He is still moody, he's still enigmatic, and so he's wondering why he's the way he is today, and he looks back to his past and he's like, oh, that's probably why, my brother and everything like that, and this is how I turned out, essentially. So he's kind of like contextualizing himself as an adult. 9C, lines 44 to 46, he doesn't may be are notable mainly because the author, again, 9C here, acknowledges his struggle to accept how his past, accept how his past has affected his identity. So this is kind of like a coming to terms type of passage where he's looking at the past and he's thinking about how he turned out as an adult here. So whoever said he's 5 years old, you know what I mean? Reflecting upon that there. It's an important factor because this whole piece is kind of him looking back at 5 years old and how everything gradually led up to who he is today here. Again, writing choices are important. Where am I? Oh, 10. 10? Yeah. What is the primary function of the final question of the passage? So I'm thinking about like, okay, what's the final question? What's the big deal, right? And we're looking at A, to convey the author's sense of lasting bitterness. Yeah, he bitter because he's thinking about like, why am I so moody? And why am I the way I am today? Oh yeah, my brother and Oxford and childhood and all that there. So this is a kind of, just grr kind of tone. 11, the author's attitude towards his past is best described as 11B, reflective resignation. So in this case, reflective, he is reflecting. This is what the whole piece is. Resignation, the acceptance of something undesirable but inevitable. So he doesn't want to be moody. He doesn't want to be enigmatic, but it is what it is. You know what I mean? So he's looking back and he's like, drat. That's why I am the way I am today. So it's really important to know a piece from top to bottom. It's really important to look for the keywords that stand out in little sections that might be focused on later on, because it really helps how you go back into the text and to go back. And again, everything can be proven by just thinking about what the piece was largely about, and then later the answers given to you here. So that's 1 through 11. Questions on this set by chance? Any questions on any of the questions? We're good. All right. We're going to move to writing in a second here. Someone DM'd me and they asked, or they said, your profile picture is creeping me out. I'll go a little exposition real quick before we move on here. My picture is about a Japanese demon. It's a legit demon, by the way. I think I Google like 1700s art on like Japanese culture, and this was one of like the folklore demons. And I was looking at it, I was like, wow, this thing's really goofy looking. It looks like a clove of garlic or something like that. I've seen a YouTube video on it before. I don't know where on the world of internet you're browsing, but wow, you actually saw this a legit image. But I had a student look at this picture. You see like little sunglasses on it, right? They saw this picture before sunglasses and they're like, I can make this better. And I was like, how? It's not possible. This thing's too cool already. and they put sunglasses on it. I was like, okay, never mind, you're right, it is cooler. And so I now use it as my Zoom picture. And every time I go to like teacher meetings back then on Zoom, they were like, what is this picture of yours? And I was like, 1700s Japanese demon. There you go. So yeah, origin stories. You're welcome. All right, let's go to writing real quick here. Writing is pretty short, but there is a technique on it. Mindy, I question the things you browse on your own now. I don't know what you're looking up on your spare time. All right, some steps to consider for the writing portion. Writing portion is shorter. Writing portion is way different. So the second you finish your your reading section's MCQ mindset, turn that off, and now you're going into writing mode. And writing mode is kind of like the SAT's writing mode, writing questions, but it's a little bit more than that. It's kind of like peer review, right? It's kind of like peer editing. Imagine you are being, I guess, hired by somebody, or you're doing like a little class thing where your friend gives you their essay and they're trying to make it better, essentially. And now you're given a bunch of choices as to how to make it better in the most logical way, right? So what do you got to do when you're doing writing portion? It's a quick read and understanding of the passage. What is it over about? What is each paragraph largely trying to convey? It's a formal essay, right? And you've written essays before, even today. When we wrote our in classes, your paragraphs were largely about singular ideas or singular topics. So the whole prompt was about, what is it? About how like entertainment might be a ruin to society, right? So that means every paragraph was to offer me a perspective on ruin or about society or about entertainment or whatever. I can guess what it was about, right? So each paragraph has its logic and its kind of approach. The passages are even shorter, but the questions are long. The writing portion, you got to switch mindsets a little bit here. So if the reading portion was about looking for the details within the passage itself, this one is more about considering the answers they give you and which one best fits in this shorter passage. So you got to be really, really focused on the answers they give. And so my focus, like imagine my reading is over here, my writing answers are over here, right? The reading, I barely even read this piece here. I'm looking really at the answers and which one best fits in this little bit of writing altogether. And I got to consider the overall sentence effects by adding or subtracting particular parts. What's changing? They're going to ask you like, should I put a word in here? Should I put a sentence in here? Should I move the sentence around here? Again, it's peer review, right? It's just trying to revise something. And I got to really think about what is changing in the integrity of this piece by making all these little shifts all together here. Speed test. We did this in our SAT little speed test, but if you're trying to do the AP writing portion, you really gotta do this fast because this is something that you're probably going to have less time on. When you're doing the reading portion, I would say most of your time is spent on the bulk of that portion here. And when you do the writing section, you want to, you're going by pretty fast. So the new AP writing section is geared towards shorter passages, denser answers, denser questions and answers. And you're trying to move by fast here as best as possible for this portion because it's more just kind of critical thinking, if anything, not really trying to find answers here. 41 to 45, right? So in this little pool of questions, I'm only giving me about a minute per question tops. And the reading that I'm giving myself is only about a minute or so now. I'm just really just kind of looking at what every paragraph consists of, and they're jumping right to the questions there. So in your little folder, go ahead and open up Writing MCQ 1. Look how short that passage is. It's super short. It's just, 2 paragraphs and only 7 sentences in total, right? And these sentences are numbered 1 through 7. So it's super short, but look at that first question. That's a big old doozy of a question there. Let's just kind of process what I'm given here. So in this first question, 41, the writer wants to add language to the end of sentence 1, reproduced below, adjusting the punctuation as needed to help clarify the central concept of the essay. So they give you a little bit of reproduction. They give you little italics of what we're focusing on, right? And for this one, I got to really break down this question. This is where I'm saying like the questions and the answers are way longer and more complex, right? So I'm looking at this. Okay, the author wants to add language, whatever language might mean. Language is like anything from a short sentence to just ideas to statistics, whatever. They want to add language to the end of sentence 1, as I see here, adjusting punctuation is needed to help clarify the central concept of the essay. Damn, that means I really have to understand the central concept of the essay too. I have to know what this whole thing's about. So I got 7 sentences. I can probably read this in a minute or maybe tops 2, right? And I have to then clarify what the central concept of this essay is. So I would read through, figure out, and now I'm looking at this line here. The line says, from Toronto, Canada to Songdo, South Korea, cities around the world are promoting themselves as smart cities. And following this, I need something added on to clarify the central concept of the essay. So I would go through all 5 answers and I'm trying to find the best one to clarify that central concept. This is where it gets a little tricky because now I have to really know what I'm talking about, right? And what this whole piece is talking about. So let's do a little speed test. Let's see how you do just blindly first on the writing portion here. We're gonna spend 7 minutes, 41 to 45. Speed test yourself here. And you're just gonna go through each question and just kind of boom, 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 trying to figure out what each one best fits as. I do a quick skim of the 2 paragraphs and I'm jumping right into the questions. No deep reading, 7 minutes on the clock. So I'll give you a 3-minute time check and a 1-minute time check here for 7 minutes. So let's see how you do. Let's see how you read through. I would actually kind of read through each answer. I know it seems like a lot of work, but that's kind of something to help you guarantee you get the right answers altogether here. Just to kind of like quickly like, nope, not this one, not this one. All right, here we go. 7 minutes on the clock. Ready, steady, and I'll mute myself real quick. And go. 7 minutes on the clock. Go. You're down to your last 3 minutes for this one here. Last 3 minutes. You're down to your last minute or so on this MCQ here. We'll go over the answers in a sec, but last minute. Last 30 seconds. Twenty seconds left. You're looking at 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. That's time for you. There you go, folks. That's the first writing MCQ that I got for you. Let's go over the answers real quick here, just to kind of consider. In light of time, I think what I'll do is I'll kind of set you up for the writing one, and later you have the resource for that one as well, and then later just kind of talk about what you can use the slides for to practice that last one. Because I actually would like, if you were practicing, right, for the writing portion, to do the next one just like really critically, meaning like going through every question, going through every answer, and just thinking about like which one's right and why it's right, but then later using kind of like the mindset here to try that one out on your own. But here are the answers. Let's see how you did for the writing portion. Nice and short, DAC, BA. So however you did is what you got for these 5 here. But as you'll know, the 5 was not really 5. These were some big old questions altogether that took the span of many pages. So we'll go over these in just a moment. And let me see, do I have the answers for this one here? I think I do. Give me a second, let me just check real quick. I think I do. Did I put them on there? Let me type it real quick so we have reference to them here in case we need to go back to this. DAC, BA in this order. There you go. DACBA. Sounds like a government program. All right. So those are the answers for you, 41 to 45 here. Let's just break it down real quick as to why it's absolutely the case, right? So in front of us, we have the questions and answers as well. And we'll talk about the little comments on the side here. So we talked about this first question, and they were asking for, again, the add-on for language to clarify the central concept of this essay here. And we're looking for the first one, D. The line starts off with, from Toronto, Canada to Songdo, South Korea, cities around the world are promoting themselves as smart cities. So something following afterwards has to clarify smart cities, what these places are doing, what's being promoted, whatever. And D says, communities that use the latest digital technology, particularly computer systems that respond to input from networks of sensors to deliver city service efficiently and improve urban life. So that makes sense to me, because at the end of sentence one, I don't really know what a smart city is yet, right? I don't really know what designates itself as smart cities. And this is the one that best clarifies it. Like in any essay, if you use any terms that are not really known to the public, then it's best that you define them through something immediately afterwards, right? So in this case, let's look at the other options, because the writing portion is to think logically about writing and what we don't do then in place afterwards. So let's say you talked about how you have these cities that are promoting themselves as smart cities, right? A, because these two cities desire to be global technology leaders, especially in engineering and data collection. So in this case, I'm thinking more about like purpose. These two cities want to be global technology leaders, but I still don't really know what a smart city is, right? And it does mention how there's like engineering and data collection, but what specifically separates that from really any other city then? B, meaning that these cities attract the smartest companies so they can, in turn, provide high-paying jobs to local residents and attract, well, this piece wasn't really about that, right? Smart city really isn't that. I mean, that's what they might be doing, but how is that still different from like a metropolis like San Jose, for example? How is it making itself a, quote, smart city? So it doesn't really fit the whole, again, central concept. C, cities prepared to move into global markets and economies that transcend the typical geographic limitations of older, more traditional cities. Okay, we're getting there. We're kind of getting there. This one's a close second. I'm getting a little bit more of an idea as to what a smart city is, one that transcends and moves into global markets, but still not too different from what normal cities are. And moving into global markets and economies, well, that's still what we kind of do from a regular city, right? D, the one that is the right answer. Communities that use the latest digital technology, particularly computer systems that respond to input from networks of sensors to deliver city services efficiently, improve urban life. Okay, this piece was largely about that, right? This piece was about sensors and about computer systems and about just kind of a more convenient city that is accessible through computer means and so forth like that. So my little commentary here, central concept is about what comprises a smart city. The add-on gives us the definition to the terminology and helps establish understanding there. So in this case, smart city is more defined in this case here. And last one, just real quick here, even though smart has little to do with their intelligence and much more to do with the ways in which the cities will respond to the growing physical needs of their population, it kind of derails a little bit, right? It kind of ignores what smart might be inferred as and talks about like the growing physical needs. So it talks more about needs rather than defining what a smart city is. So thinking as a writer, someone needs definition of smart city. I give you a definition of smart city here. 42, just real quick, we'll go through these real quick. 42 is A. The writer wants to avoid revealing any potential bias in sentence 3, and the sentence reproduced below is underlined as to which one is the least biased. The original sentence says, civil engineering professor and infrastructure expert Shoshana Sachs explains. Nothing wrong about that. It's pretty objective, right? All it really gives me is titles. Civil engineering professor, infrastructure expert Shoshana Sachs. That's really it. So this here doesn't really have any bias. The other ones has a lot of bias to it. And if you want to think about bias in language, tone, for example, it's really the adjectives that go over the descriptors, right? So I have dismissive, that's pretty biased. I have sternly insightful, bias, scornful, bias, clever, bias. These little adverbs, these little adjectives here suggest bias because you're describing it in a subjective way now. But if I just put the facts of the title, that's as objective as possible here. So when they ask you questions about objective and subjective, you want to think about, okay, which words convey feeling words, right? Words that a person might feel but another might not, or things that are factual can't dispute, like the titles of somebody here. So 42, we're looking at A. 43, the writer wants to add a sentence after sentence 5, reproduced below, to elaborate on the sentence's description of the contrast between infrastructure with and without sensors for data collection. In short, they want to give us a little contrast between two different worlds, right? One with the sensors and one without. So in this case, the sentence is adding sensors for data collection to public services such as water and electricity distribution introduces new vulnerabilities to urban infrastructure. So in this case, I got to think about, okay, I got to think about then a world with sensors and one without, and looking at this new information here, this new topic introduces new vulnerabilities to infrastructure here. So something in here has to follow up with a little bit of Again, vulnerability. C is the answer here, and it says water pipes, roads, and other elements of conventional infrastructure last for decades, precisely because they are not, quote, smart. They are structures with relatively simple, easy to replace parts. So it shows me now that in this smart world here, there are still some issues that the old world doesn't have because they're easy to replace and all that, whereas the smart ones are needing of like computer experts and little, I don't know, microchips, whatever, things that are more technical in this case. So in this case, it lets me know the smart versus the, I guess, non-smart world, and having a little contrast between the two infrastructures of with and without. Two more. B for 44. Writers considering adding the clause, devices that work optimally only for a few years before bugs in their programming introduce glitches and errors to the end of sentence 6 or below, adjusting the punctuation as needed. So they want to add this, and the question is yes or no. You're going to get at least one of these for writing section here. And they're going to ask you basically, does this fit and why? So in this case, B, it does fit because the additional information clarifies a comparison to a more familiar technology that also breaks or becomes obsolete relatively quickly. So let's look at that little italics parts here. It says Sachs and other experienced city planners worry that networked digital infrastructure would be more akin to a smartphone or a computer. It fits because by saying that, I'm like, okay, it's like a smartphone, it's like a computer. How? Why? And it's like one because these are devices that work optimally only for a few years before bugs in the programming introduce glitches and errors. So in this case, it does fit because it gives me a little bit more insight, a little bit more understanding, right? Thinking about how certain things should be removed or added in for context or too much context or tangents or whatever. Last one, 45. The writer wants to add evidence to exemplify the main argument of the second paragraph. Which of the following pieces of evidence would best accomplish this goal? And for this last one, we're looking at a narrative about a city in which smart city technology designed to determine the best routes for garbage collection required costly repairs after 3 years. Now, why is it this answer? Let's look at what the second paragraph is about. Real quick, if you can look at the second paragraph, right? My usual strategy for people when they're reading any passage for MCQ is look at least at the first sentence because that will give you some insight. So let's read that real quick. First one says, or sentence 5 says, adding sensors for data collection to public services such as water and electricity distribution introduces new vulnerability to urban infrastructure. So we need something about vulnerability. We need something that lets me know there are some issues with that, and I need some evidence for that there. So in this case, we're looking at A. Why is A fit? It's a narrative where there are, what do you call it? These garbage collection routes that need to be like determined and everything like that require costly repairs after 3 years. And that's the thing, right? It gives me another example of why there are issues with this here. And as claimed, there are some new vulnerabilities that exist altogether. In this example, the problems of having to redesign and to refocus and all that there. So that fits best compared to these other ones altogether here. So this is really a logic test. Writing is really a logic test and just thinking about which one is most flowing, which one is best supporting, which one doesn't belong, what have you here. And so I give you one more. I kind of have a feeling we've done this before. It's about tiny houses. I hope we didn't do this one. Hopefully, if we did, then you've forgotten it. But I don't know why we're running one. It's running two. Anyways. To respect everyone's time here, if you want to try your hand at writing some more, because writing is really like, again, I say more critical and thinking. I think rhetorical is more observational. This one's more like thinking, processing, and all that here. For this one, I would have you do, again, kind of like a deep dive for the questions and answers, and just think about why is your answer correct, and to justify it and to go through each one. Wait, don't look at the slides real quick. I'm browsing which ones I put up here. Okay. Oh, look at the answers. So when you're doing this one on your own, what I would suggest is this. Again, there's not too many questions. It's a little longer than the previous one, but that means that the questions are a little bit shorter, right? So what you would do is I want you to think about what kind of questions being asked, right? The question types. Some of them are altering current sentences to remove, to add. Some of them are modifying to change sentences and to, flip the wording around. Some of them are merging, thinking about how do I combine certain ideas and to combine like ideas into one super sentence maybe. And some of them are punctuation, right? So I want to have you, before you even go into the questions and answers and all that, just think about what is the task asking to do. And just being really, really careful and really specific as to what are the criteria they laid out for you and how do you do that particular task with the questions and answers before you're there. So that one, I have you doing your own. The explanations are at the very end as well, and the answers following afterwards. So you can kind of see and check and do it on your own time here. This one has, what is it, like 8 questions? That will warrant you about 9, no more than 10 minutes for this one here. So if you're doing this on your own to time yourself, I say 9 to 10 minutes, no more than that there. So that one, I have you doing your own. Any questions on the previous MCQ we just did, or MCQs in general here? We'll end with this one then, and then later I'll just open the floor for any questions about MCQs in general for reading and writing. Questions for anybody or from anybody? We're good? I hope we're good. Questions twice, sold? Okay. I'm going to assume you're generally okay, or you just exist in some form. All right, folks. If you have no questions, then enjoy the rest of your Monday. See how well you do on that last one if you'd like to challenge and tackle it. And if you have any questions about MCQs, about like the ones we've done or just ones in general, just let me know. We'll go over them as well, just to kind of get some ideas there. But yeah, that's really what MCQs are. On the one hand, reading comprehension. What do you see? What do you find? On the other one, what do you see? What can you fix and make better or efficient, whatever, right? So this is the 2 MCQ rules there. All right, folks. That's it from me. Have a good day. Peace out. And man, this really reminded me of last year. The silence, the quiet, the neglect. Everyone's playing League of Legends. And I'm just talking to myself here. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Only like, oh, play Valorant. Okay. All right. My mistake. All right, I'm gonna get some food. I'm eating all day, so I'm hella hungry. So peace out, bros.